Welcome to the webinar, and over to Ms. Alice to give the welcome address.
Good morning, one and all. I, Alice David, Head Department of Economics, on behalf of the Faculty of Social Sciences, St. Francis College Women Begumpet, take this opportunity to welcome our resource person, Professor K.S.S. Seshan, Head Department of History, retired, Hyderabad Central University, our colleagues, faculty from other colleges, research scholars, and students. We take this opportunity to welcome each one of you for this webinar. We thank you for sparing your time to be with us this morning. Over the past few months, we have witnessed many changes like never before in our lives as well as in the world. The world has previously too experienced world wars, Great Depression, many epidemics, and has always come out stronger and better. In this context, our topic, coronavirus, is it unprecedented, will enable us to understand how we can make use of this crisis and also take it as an opportunity to do things differently, helping us to build better lives and economies. On this note, I request Dr. Uma Joseph, Head Department of History, to introduce our resource person. We also request our participants to post your comments and questions in the chat box, which will be answered at the end of the session. We will also be sending you a link in which you will be filling the feedback form, after which you will be given your e-certificate. Over to Uma, ma'am.
Thank you, Alice. It is my joy today to introduce Professor K.S.S. Seshan to you. And it's been a joy because K.S.S. sir was my student. Just one second. I was a student of Professor K.S.S. Seshan, and he was the former head of the Department of History, University of Hyderabad, and with a rich experience of 39 years of teaching experience. He was for some time even associated with the Assam Central University, Silchar, where he was the founder head Department of History. He has guided successfully 9 PhD and 22 MPhil scholars during the course of his long teaching career of 39 years. He has visited also a number of universities like the Oxford University, Manchester, and Edinburgh in United Kingdom, where he participated in seminars, gave invited lectures, and his biographical details are featured in Reference Asia Volume 9, Asia Who is Who. Professor K.S. Seshan has written 10 books, more than 50 research articles in revered journals, and has reviewed 15 books. He contributed articles to the Hindu and the Deccan Herald and State Times Jammu on historical aspects. He has written lessons for distance education for both Dr. Ambedkar University as well as the University of Hyderabad. He has undertaken 2 major research projects by UGC. His radio talks are also very popular. Professor Seshan is connected with a number of history associations in the country. He was a sectional president at the 79th annual session of the Indian History Congress held at Bhopal in February 2019. He also served earlier as a treasurer, joint secretary, and as the executive committee member of the Indian History Congress, the highest body of the professional historians in India. And he has a rich source of knowledge, especially even on this topic that he's going to speak today. And it's really my joy and my honor to introduce him. We now request.
Good morning, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank the Faculty of Social Sciences, St. Francis Women's College, Begumpet, for making me to be with you on this webinar. And I also thank Dr. Uma Joseph for so many kind with which, with all the superlatives she has made the I really thank you for the occasion given to me. The present topic that is ascribed is the coronavirus or COVID-19 is it unprecedented? This term unprecedented we often hear uttered by politicians, by people, by the press. Everywhere it is there, the word unprecedented. But those who are acquainted with history may not think so, because history is replete with a number of endemics, epidemics, and pandemics which have ravaged the countries, the continents from the early known history. That's why it is very difficult to digest the term that is unprecedented. But the speed with which the scope and the spread of the present pandemic may make us to believe that it is unprecedented. But historically speaking, there have been number of such pandemics which ravaged, which gave a lot of trouble to humanity in the past. So the coming 30, 40 minutes that is ascribed to me, we'll just make a survey in history as to how did these pandemics bother humanity. See, from the early stages, diseases and pandemics have been visiting. Diseases like malaria, plague, cholera, measles, malaria, several others. And in recent years, recent decades, we do hear of Ebola, the SARS, MERS, and then bird flu, swine flu, several other things we do here. They are very easy to catch, but hard to kill. And normally, pandemics are compared to that of famines. Famines and pandemics have some commonality, that is, they bring in a lot of catastrophe for the people. And the comparison stops there, because famines are thoroughly different from pandemics. Famines are very choosy, very selective. They are highly discriminatory. Whenever there are scarcity conditions for food grains, famines do descend upon people. And when stocks are rushed from place of plenty to place of scarcity, that problem is tied over. Whereas pandemics are not that way. Pandemics are levelers. And a millionaire living in a mansion and a poor man living in a hovel or hut, these two are brought onto the same page by pandemics. That is why we call it as levelers, not discriminatory. And people are also, they come closer, they are made to be inwardly, they will look inwardly during the period of pandemics, not during the period of famines. It was P.B. Shelley who very succinctly puts this particular problem in 2 lines when he has written a poem. Our sweetest songs are those that tell us the saddest of thoughts. So pandemics do tell about such saddest thoughts, and that is what we, the students of history, we are made to realize how humanity has been battling with this particular viruses for such a long period of time. Pandemics are as old as history, as old as civilization. If you care to look at the past, they have been there from the known period of history, or even prehistory period also, they have been bothering humanity. See, for in recounting this, in other words, for the past 10 to 12,000 years, probably man must have been battling with this pandemics one after the other. See, when man started to move from hunter-gathering stage to that of the civilized life, and he learned to live in communities, when he started to depend upon agriculture, the more innovative agriculture as a vocation, probably on the same day must have started the visiting of the pandemics. In other words, when he started to move with the people, when he was becoming a social animal, he is connected to that of the visitations of pandemics. And pandemics, when they came, it was with the same kind of calamity that it was caused. But when he started, when man started to have interactions with other communities, when there was mobility in him, and with trading centers proliferating, the speed and scope of pandemics also started to spread. In other words, when he was in an isolated way in the hunting gathering stage, there was much trouble. But when he started to move with others, along with it, along with civilization, along with urbanization, you find pandemics also started to increase in their veracity. So that way, pandemics have been there as a part of humanity right from the initial stages of civilization. And I should also draw your attention to the fact that pandemics have changed the course of history. You have innumerable instances to say as to how societies have changed. Not only societies, the course of history has been put into different orders on account of the calamities caused by pandemics. Now, in this present exercise, we will try to bring in, I will try to brush up your memories in trying to examine some of the select pandemics in history. Not all, there are about 20 to 25 major pandemics which troubled humanity, but it will be the time given to me for this particular slot may not be sufficient in order to make even a rough survey of all the pandemics, but suffice it would be just to convince you how we have learned or we have not learned from the lessons out of the previous pandemics. So when I said the course of history has been changed on account of the pandemics, I give few examples like Roman Empire. We all here, particularly students of history, they remember how Rome fell. There have been a number of causes, but the most important cause has been the plague which occurred in the 6th century, weakened the strong Roman Empire. The invincible Roman Empire was weakened on account of the plague. And for its destruction, death and destruction of this empire, it was so easy. Even Lombard, small state like Lombardy, was able to defeat, and Roman Empire fell into ashes like a house of cards. And pandemic was responsible, the great Justinian plague. You come to the medieval period, you find Black Death has caused so much of ravage that even today, Europeans have not forgotten this pandemic which happened in the medieval period, in the 14th century. What were the net results on it? How can we presume that history was by the Black Death? For the downfall of feudalism, the most important cause has been the pandemic. Black Death was responsible for bringing down such a strong socio-political, economic institution like feudalism. Nobody thought feudalism would die so soon. It had the roots, and every movement was condemned by this rigid system of feudalism. But as you know, like a house of cards, feudalism started on the Black Death. Not only that, not only feudalism which exists, but even the coming up of Renaissance, information, we connect it directly to the outbreak of the pandemic, namely Black Death. We'll come to the details when we take up Black Death, but suffice it to you that great cultural revolution like Renaissance was made possible, it was made feasible on account of Black Death. Because Black Death gave a lot of life for everyone. For, as I told you earlier, the millionaire as well as the poor man were both equally were affected. And Black Death has brought the fear of death for everyone. And they started looking not forward but backwards. And what was Renaissance? Renaissance was only to look backward in order to bring the best in ancient period. All that which was good in ancient period were revived. The literal meaning of Renaissance is rebirth, rebirth of old institutions, old systems, and old culture was brought back, and that is how modern age started to dawn. In thought, art, and literature, you find the new trends have come into being. The backdrop was Black Death. And to cite you another example as to how history has been completely modified, rectified by these pandemics, the next example is you find Americas, both North and South. In 16th and 17th centuries, when Europeans started to migrate to the New World after Columbus. And Columbus' discovery also is a controversial thing because we see in Europe, they were telling discovered America. And this word discovery was restricted to, it was first American. Recent 1999, it was celebrated the 500-year 500th year of his going to America was to be celebrated by Spain. Americans objected to it. They questioned who discovered whom. They said Americans have seen Columbus for the first time. Americans have discovered Columbus. Americans have discovered Europe through Columbus. That was the stand taken by the Americans. But the American original settlers in America, they had their own civilizations. You all know very well. Inak, and then Aztec. These were the ancient old native civilizations which the Americans had, Native Americans had. What happened to them? They were all destroyed. They were all brought to ruin on account of the inroads made by the Spaniards first, but Spaniards were not the only one. The other Europeans, they followed. Portuguese, the French, the English, and the Dutch people. They all went with their, not only with arms and ammunition, they also took the diseases like not plague, yellow fever, measles, and with these diseases, they were able to wipe out the civilizations. Iraq and then Aztec civilizations were wiped out on account of the inroads made by Europeans with their diseases, with number of such viruses. And you have another example. People say there is no exaggeration when you hear that World War I, the curtains on World War I were drawn by swine flu. We'll discuss about it in detail later if the time permits. So that way, in history, there were occasions when course corrections were made by one pandemic or the other. Now, let us for academic can do that pandemics rate in control. Let us examine some of them as reference. Few historic and prehistory, one or two from ancient history, and one particularly from medieval bracket, and few from the modern period. I have chosen to place before you to discuss in slightly detail, not in very minute detailed way. Let us start with the one which happened in the Bronze Age. See, Bronze Age plague has got no records in the modern sense of the term. But archaeologists have come forward to help us in trying to locate, in trying to analyze how pandemics have happened even in the prehistoric period. A small village in the northeast China had a plague. This was 5,000 years ago, 3000 BC in the sense it must be 5,000 years back. The entire village was afflicted with the disease, and all the people, the entire population of the village, they died. Men, women, children, young, old, everybody died, and there was none even to give proper burials. So somehow all the bodies were stuffed into a house, it was set on fire, but later on the bodies were buried. Recently, there was the archaeologists, they have found a mass grave in that particular locality. The scientists have analyzed the bones, the skeletons, and then the teeth. It says the teeth it preserves the strains of virus for ages together. So this was done, this was put into DNA test, and the scientists have come out with the conclusion that all the people died on account of plague. Not the usual bubonic plague, but pneumonic plague. We'll come to the difference between these two at a later date. So this was a different strain, and it was plague of a different name, like pneumonic. Another mass grave was unearthed. Other part of the globe, in steppes of Russia, Russian steppes also had a massive mass grave, which was unearthed by recent archaeologists. And there, when they examined, 101 skeletons were found there, and a lot of teeth, and similar tests were done. And all the teeth and these bones, they tested positive for the same virus. The same virus as it was found in China. So what is the pattern of it? What is the conclusion that we do get? What is it that the scientists have suggested after strenuous studying of all these two major graves? And similar smaller graves are also found in Europe, Western Europe, which corroborated to the same period, to the same kind of disease. So they have come out with conclusion that the plague, it pervaded the entire it has traveled from east to west, not only west, but even it has gone to as far as Russia. So Russian steppes had the same kind of virus that the Chinese have had, and it must have traveled in those days through the Silk Route. Through the Silk Route, it must have gone, but trade transit was not there in those days, but only the massive peasant populations, peasant farming communities must have traveled from one end to the other end of the globe. So there is a very likelihood that the people from Russian steppes, they have migrated. Huge big migrations were there both in Europe and Central Asia. And it is every possibility is there that Russian steppe farmers from Russia, people from Russia, they migrated towards Europe, and they have gone even up to Central Asia. This is corroborated not only by the archaeologists and the scientists, but even by linguists. There have been a number of studies made on account of Europe and even Central Asia, including India, Sanskrit, for example, they had a common family of languages. And if we were to believe Father Heras for this particular theory, but there are many who never hear of, they don't accept the theory propounded by Father Heras. And it was his contention that Russian steppes, people from Russian steppes, they came in large numbers. They surmounted all the difficulties. They settled down in Europe. Not only that, from Europe, they have extended even to Central Asia. Plains also were colonized by the Russian steppes. This is one theory of Father Heras, and I caution that it need not be defined, it need not be accepted as the final. But anyway, this theory has been that people from Russia, they have migrated in large numbers. They have replaced the farming communities in Western Europe and in Central Asia when large-scale deaths were there on account of the pneumonic plague that was caused during the Bronze Age. Because Bronze Age was slightly different from the earlier ages because people have learned how to smelt copper with tin. And the bronze metals, they were used in two occasions. For agriculture. For agriculture, it was highly useful because they could have deep ploughing. Deep ploughing means weather resistant and high yielding varieties of crop is possible through deep ploughing. And at the same time, bronze was also utilized for arms and ammunition, which became a very strong instrument of warfare. So people from Russia, they were well equipped, they were better during that particular period, and they have filled in the vacuum that was created by the large scale deaths in Europe as well as in Central Asia. This is what we do resume during the prehistoric period. Now, coming to the recorded history, coming to the time when things have been well laid out and records are available for us to gauge, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Justinian.
I just wanted to interrupt you for 1 minute. If you can speak a
Yes.
little loudly, the audience are saying that they would like you to speak a little more loudly, sir. Thank you so much.
One second, Dr. Uma.
Yes,
Is it
sir.
all right now?
Yeah, now
Is
it's
it all
much
right?
better. Yes, sir. Yes. A little loudly if you speak, that's fine. Thank you.
Right. I think
Yeah, you're fine, sir,
this
now.
will be all right.
Yes,
Is
sir.
it all
Yes.
right now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So the next one is during the ancient period, Justinian plague ravaged the entire European continent. What is this Justinian plague? Justinian was a Roman emperor. Yes, it was he who gave the Roman law. The 4 books of law, it was he who provided. Even now it is remembered, like Hammurabi, like our Napoleon. Napoleon's code, Napoleon also is very famous. You know, in France, even today, the present constitution of France, to a large extent, it revolves around the code that was given by Napoleon. And to the students of history, I am only reminding as to how conscious he was, Napoleon, throughout his life, even after laying down his office as the emperor, he was conscious of the contribution that he made. Once an officer, high-ranking officer, British East India Company officer. Probably he was on the way to India from England. He visited Napoleon when he was in exile at St. Helena. He asked him, Napoleon, what is it that you believe that you did great during your own lifetime? Pat came the answer without even waiting for a second. He said, to quote his own words, my real glory lies not having won the 40 battles. What will never be effaced, what will endure forever is my civil code. That is how he proudly remembered that his great contribution was the civil code that he has given to his country. So similarly, Justinian was a great lawgiver, but unfortunately this Justinian, though he was a lawgiver, he did not follow the laws that he himself has promulgated when the plague has come. I will tell you how antagonistic he was for the peasants, particularly the poor peasants. This Justinian, he was a survivor of the plague. Incidentally, he got plague, he was afflicted with the disease, but he survived. After surviving, probably he became more cruel than ever before. So he was getting through the ships it has come. The disease has come to Constantinople. And Constantinople was the capital for Eastern Roman Empire. And it was a very vast, big empire, as you know. It was the most powerful one also at that period of time. But when the plague came, when it started ravaging, it seems 1/3 of the population perished during this particular Justinian plague. And he took measures. He never had any empathy for the poor, particularly for the peasant communities. When the plague was on, when people were dying, he never stopped collecting land rent, land taxes, because he needed money. He needed money for two things. One, to build huge, big cathedrals in Constantinople, and another one, he needed also a lot of money for waging wars. In spite of the fact that his kingdom was ravaged by the plague, this was bubonic plague, and still he continued his wars against others, particularly the Vandals, in order to unify Western Roman Empire with his own Eastern Roman Empire. He wanted to unite, but the tragedy is he was not successful in uniting. Not only that, he also saw immediately after him there was the ruin of the very Roman Empire. So he had an innovative thing in collecting the land revenue from the surviving plague peasants, plague infested peasants. He collected rents not only for the lands that they possessed, but they were made to, peasants were made to pay land rents belonging to the dead neighbors. See, those who were dead neighbors, their land rents also were to be paid by them, implying that they can as well occupy their lands. That was his intention. His intention was lands should not be left fallow. They should be occupied by somebody or the other. Presuming that the neighbors will occupy the dead man's lands, rent has to be paid. That was the rule that he introduced. And it did havoc on the part of the peasants. Peasants in the rural side, they fled away from the region, from their homes, from their lands, and thereby agriculture suffered a great lot. When agriculture suffered, you can imagine everything will suffer, because that was the only way that he can feed people. He was also importing, no doubt he was also importing, but then native agriculture came to a standstill. Many started flying away from Rome. And at that time, you find he went on an expedition to northern Italy. His idea was to unite Eastern Roman Empire with that of the Western Roman Empire. When his troops were stationed in north, Lombardy took initiative in attacking the troops which were stationed in northern Italy by Justinian. And when they were defeated, when they were made to fly away from there, you find that Lombardy's example was imitated by all other northern Italian states like Parma, Tuscany, Modena. All these small, petty, independent, they became independent. They have shed the rule of Justinian, and immediately after his death, what you find is, including Sicily and Naples, they were also declaring independence, and the entire kingdom was shattered and the Roman Empire fell. So for this, the main reason was Roman Empire became weak. And why Roman Empire has become weak? It was because of the plague. So logically speaking, the Justinian plague, that ravaged Roman Empire, ancient Roman Empire. It was responsible for the very downfall of Roman, the invincible Roman Empire. Next, after the Roman, see Justinian plague, we have, as an example, we'll try to spend a bit more time with the medieval one, which occurred in the medieval period, namely Black Death. Black Death, the very name Black Death, even today, it rouses great fear and threat among the Europeans who are conversant with history. The reason is, world can be seen in two parts: the world before Black Death and the world after Black Death. So it is a big dividing line, not only for the students of history, but in many ways, it made European world history into two parts. Black Death remains as the most devastating of all the pandemics. It was a bubonic one. Now let me explain to you how this bubonic has come into being. When this plague occurs, people will develop, the infested will develop large, big buboes. From the word buboes, the bubonic has come. These boils are known as buboes. They'll turn black, and it makes skin very brittle, and blood and pus will ooze out from those buboes. And when he lays down, when the patient lays down on a cot or on a cloth or on a mat, the skin will stick to the mat, so it embeds itself with mat so thickly that when you pull the map, not only the map will come out, but along with the map, lumps of flesh of the infected also will come. That was the severity of this particular bubonic plague. And most of it, except the Bronze Age one, all other plagues which came during the ancient, medieval, and modern periods, including the one in Bombay, which occurred in Bombay during 1897, they were all bubonic, more severe. It appears 90% of the infected, 90% it would be fatal. That was the difference between pneumonic and bubonic. So the Black Death was pneumonic because of the color it changed. The buboes changed the color into thick, dark black. And out of this has come the nomenclature Black Death. Some people believe that it came to Europe after crossing the Black Sea. But we don't have evidence to believe that Black Sea was responsible for calling it as Black Death. It was not so. It was because of the change of the color of the victim into black color, into thick black color, the word bubonic has come, Black Death has come into being. So this occurred in the year, it came to Europe in the year 1341, and it ravaged for nearly 7 years, 7 long years. And no European country was left without being infected with this disease, the Black Death. Again, like all other pandemics, even Black Death also had its origins in China. But somehow the needle of suspicion always, whenever a pandemic or epidemic occurs, the great suspicion was not only suspicion, it was also true. The mapping of this travel was done very well in a very scientific way during the later bubonic plagues. Like, for example, in the 19th century, which is known as Asian plague. The Europeans call it as Calcutta plague also, because instead of calling it as India plague, Calcutta was India, India was Calcutta before 1911, because Calcutta was the capital city. So at that time, the mapping was done. It was like this. Every plague, it emanates in Russia, somewhere in Russia, like Wuhan now, right now. So from China, it passes through Hong Kong. From Hong Kong to Colombo, Colombo to Bombay, Bombay to Karachi, from Karachi to Central Asia, and from Central Asia, Middle East, and to all the Mediterranean ports, and through Mediterranean ports, Constantinople. From there, it travels to Europe, and Europe means all the countries. Say it may be Italy, then France, then to England, from England in those days to Scotland. So that way you find there was a regular route that was. Battery low and something. Sorry, there is a small interruption.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
We-
You can go ahead.
Right. You can hear me,
Yes,
Uma?
yes, yes, sir. You're very clear. You
Good.
can go ahead.
Right. Uma, regarding the time, even if I am lost with this, you can stop me anytime.
Okay, okay. Sure, sir. I'll let you know. Right.
Yes, in case I lose
Sure, sure,
um,
sir.
touch with the time.
Yes,
Is
sir.
it all right now?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
So this mapping of the pandemic was done at a later date, and when you see the past, it corroborates with all the pandemics which occurred. Somehow, uh, with a small digression, once Winston Churchill he wrote a poem when he was a small boy of 15, just 15 years. And the poem's name was Influenza. At that time, there was influenza, there was a flu in England, 1888, 1889, that was the time. And 1888, he was a boy of 15 years because he was born in 1874. And to the school magazine, he has written this poem. That was the only occasion when Churchill wrote a poem. Otherwise, he was a good prose writer. And for writing prose, he got the Nobel Prize also, as you know. History of the English-speaking peoples. That was for volume 1. And there was also War Memoirs. For War Memoirs, he got Nobel Prize. But in this poem, he says, the flu, the influenza, which is now ravaging, it has emanated from China. He says, from celestial China, it has come through the thirsty sands of Arabia, through the thirsty sands of Arabia. And then it has come along with the sun, because sun travels from east to west. Small boy, he writes, it has come along with the sun from east to west. And he has some hope, like a very true optimist, he says, it will go away with the spring. When the spring arrives, it will go away. That is how every time, whenever a pandemic occurs, people generally think in terms of China. Maybe for their eating habits, maybe because of the torrid climate in which China and other Central Asian countries are, somehow they connect it to the East, particularly to Far East, for the birth of, for the emergence of uh, any pandemic. So that way, Black Death also has emanated from China, and it traveled so quickly, but it ravaged entire Europe. What is more important for us, the lessons that we learn from this Black Death is that all the peasant communities were wiped out. Peasants in large numbers, they were found dead during the period of Black Death. The lands were left fallow. There was none to cultivate. The few who were survivors, it was a big windfall for them. The labor scarcity made them to reap better wages. Better wages were paid for the remaining labor, and their living conditions were improved. They were able to have good housing. They were able to possess the lands that which were deserted by the lords, and 30 to 40% of the values have gone down, the lands in those days. So they became landowners. Many serfs in many countries, not only Central European countries, but everywhere, France, England, you find Scotland, all the European countries were reduced to the same level of living on account of Black Death. 1/3 of the total population when they perished, and most of them were serfs. What happened was, when serfs were the remaining serfs, they were able to climb the ladder of the successful economic field so high that many of them became landowners. And tables were turned against the lords. Lords have become in turn the serfs now. They lined up before the erstwhile serfs for services. That was the magic done by Black Death. And Black Death also was responsible for some intellectual awakening, because the large-scale deaths, it inculcated the fear of death among the survivors. Though some of the rich people were able to keep themselves away from the plague, from the epidemic, but there was the fear of death. This fear of death has brought many changes. Number one is they started to look inwardly, and this inward looking made them to be philanthropic. Venice and Genova had rich merchants, we know, and they became so opulent. They are also called as merchant princes. They lived like princes. They had a lot of money. What to do with that money? When death was knocking at the doors, these rich people, They never had any other avocation, other way to spend that accumulated money. So what they did, they started encouraging men of letters, Dante, Petrarch, Boccaccio. These were the first-rate writers of that period. What did Boccaccio write? If you care to see Decameron, the book written by Boccaccio, it reveals how he was so present so present at the time of the plague which was ravaging. All his writings were on the present. There was no imagination. There was no see. It was in epic proportions he has written, and you get first-hand information about the Black Death through the writings of Boccaccio. He is considered to be one of the famous Renaissance writers, along with Dante. None of them, these writers, Renaissance writers, they were looking so inwardly that they never thought in terms of future. Unlike the French writers, like see Montesquieu, Diderot, D'Alembert, Voltaire, how much they have written, what they have written. Montesquieu has foreseen, he was able to foresee the present day democracies. It was he who started telling separation of powers is the panacea for all political ills. Executive, legislature, judiciary, they should not be in one single person, the king. They should be separated. How much he was able to see. Social contract. Man is born free, but everywhere is in chains. How much he could foresee things to come. The 18th century writers in France. That is absent in Renaissance. The reason was Black Death. Black Death made them, they were so afraid of death, they themselves. So what they did, they never had the courage to see the future, but they had empathy to see the past, and whatever was best, whatever was followed in ancient period, the traditions, the secular tendencies, all that they said they are good, and these things should be replicated in the present situation. That is how, whether it is art, architecture, painting, music, whatever you take up, all this was revival of the old. So Black Death thus was responsible in conditioning not only farmers, agriculture, etc., but even the minds of the intellectuals. That was the magic done by Black Death. And we can go on Black Death, but let us move from medieval to that of modern. When we come to the beginning of the modern period, I would like to remind you how London had a huge big plague as early as 1665. This is known as London plague. It may not be pandemic. It would be, you can style it as epidemic because it was limited to the city London. And I should tell you, the plague was responsible. It was made possible on account of rodents, and the rodents generally in the bubonic plague, the infected rodents carry their hosts. Rats are the hosts of the disease, and this is carried by the carriers are the flies which rest on the infected rodents. They will carry to humans. This is as simple as that. London plague can be linked to that of the unhygienic conditions in which London people lived in that particular period. You'll be surprised to know that London was not London of the present day with the spick and span with so much of hygiene, etc. But it was the Thames River. It was an open drain. Our Manjira is far better today. Manjira is what Manjira is today, Manjira River. There are many similarities and contrasting things between the two, between Manjira and then Thames in London, because both of them, they run in the middle of the city, like our Spain in the back of our body, dividing this city into two divisions, north and south. And the comparison stops there. In those days, it was a stinking drain, stinking drain, carrying all the filth of Londoners. And even the streets were full of dust, full of filth. And in the center of the narrow roads London had in those days, there used to be open drains. And all the garbage, people were liberal in throwing all the garbage into the middle of the road, into the open drains. And the rodents, it was a heaven for the rodents. They thrived on them. And naturally, they carried the disease. In the month of April 1665, plague broke out. I should also remind you the political situation of the period in England at that time. Charles II was restored to the throne after the long drawn, what you call the Puritan Revolution. After 11 years of Puritan Revolution, you find there was 11 years of Commonwealth ruled by, Commonwealth was headed by Oliver Cromwell, as you know. He brought republic. That was the only time in the long history of England when people's government was there between uh, uh, see immediately after the end of the Puritan Revolution. So 1660, he came to the throne. For 5 years, he was into the administration, Charles II. He was very kind towards the people. He had not only sympathy and empathy, but he was one with them. That is how he thought that he should be close to the people. So London had a total population of about 4 lakhs in those days. It was a walled city, with 448 to be very precise. 448 acres of land was the extent of London, old London, surrounded by walls built by the Romans of the day. And then when plague broke out, apart from the central London, there were also small colonies outside of the wall. Those colonies were called as liberties. In those days, they called them as liberties. So many of the opulent, they lived in liberties, whereas other poor and commoners, they lived in the city. When this plague broke out, even the king himself, he has to quit London. He went over to Oxford. He stayed there with his family. And it ravaged for 18 months. You find that the plague, there was no end for this plague. And nearly 1 lakh of people perished during this period, 1/4 of the population, because it is supposed to have had 4 lakhs. When such a vast majority of people died, uh, see, the open drains, the health and hygienic conditions were so bad. So then it dawned upon the administration that these two are to be addressed. So when they were thinking in terms of the plans, the woes of the Londoners were not to be over. You find immediately it was followed by the Great London Fire that you know in 1666 on September 2nd, you find the Great London Fire took place. It all started with a spark in a bakery in the Pudding Street, and soon, like wildfire, it caught up. The entire 1/3 of the city was burned down in 4 days, four full days. You get a graphic account about the woes of the people during the period of plague as well as fire through the diaries written by Samuel Pepys. He was the this is the first-hand information. He was present, bodily he was present, and it was a contemporary writing because day to day he has given, blow by blow, he has given the accounts of these two great catastrophes which occurred to the Londoners. By the time of London fire, the king has come back from Oxford, and you have graphic accounts as to how taking a bucket of water, Charles II himself used to go and dousing the fire. Anyway, it made a big catastrophe. And after the plague and fire in London, Londoners, they sat up to think in terms of public hygiene and then cleaning up the Thames. And you find the modern, you can say the beginnings for the birth of modern London has taken place after these two catastrophes. London Thames was completely, it was the drain was stopped and they cleaned up. Today, the Londoners they drink the water of Thames because 50 miles upstream they have got filters, and that is how Thames River has been cleaned up. And roads were reformed by one Sir Benjamin Hall. That was the person who took to civic amenities, and thoroughly London was transformed. This is what Hall has done, Benjamin. His name is still remembered because Big Ben is named after him. Ben is Benjamin. And on that huge big bell, which is inside the Big Ben Tower, Elizabeth Tower, his name, the 3 letters, Ben, is written. It is actually Big Bell, but it is called as Big Ben only in the name of this person who, after the plague of London, reformed the entire town civic amenities were reformed by him, and modern London was to come only after Benjamin Hall. Similarly, Christopher Wren was the person, the great architect, who was able to rebuild the entire city of London after the fire. He was responsible for rebuilding not only St. Paul's Cathedral, but many of these churches which were burned down. All public buildings were to the credit of Christopher Wren. So now, leaving London plague, we'll move on to a city in France, that is Marseille. Marseille is, even now, it is well known for the salubrious and enchanting climate in France. It is a Mediterranean, beautiful Mediterranean port city, and which is preferred by many well-to-do throughout Europe to go and settle down today. But there was a time in 18th century when a huge big plague, which is still remembered, it is there in the back of the mind of the average Marseille person, that plague has devastated the. So this to the city of Marseille, to the port of Marseille, a ship arrived in 1720 with cotton and silk, probably from it arrived from Egypt, but the cargo must have been procured in China because Chinese silk was considered to be the most fashionable in those days. So in 1720, when this ship arrived with the huge bales of cotton cloth and silk cloth, it also brought the disease. By the time it reached the port city of Marseille, a Turkish man died, few sailors died, and even the ship doctor has died, and their bodies were there on the board of the ship. And when it called on the port, the local administration, when they came to know that the plague has come along with the ship, they decided that the cargo will be taken out, it will be downloaded, not the people. All the people were quarantined. They were asked to stay on in the ship, and the cargo was downloaded. See here, what was the compulsion in taking away the cargo at such breakneck speed? The reason was there was a local fair that was coming up. And in the local fair, they wanted to sell this cloth, cotton as well as silk, and they were all waiting. As you know, French people are always fashion-minded, and they were waiting for purchasing this silk from China. And they were in great, there was a lobby, and the ship was owned by the mayor of Marseille. And the mayor naturally was a part of the administration. It was so close to the powers of the day. That is how economic compulsions made the administration to remove the cargo from the ship, though the people were left. But alas, along with the cargo, along with the silk and cotton cloth, the disease also was brought out of the ship, because rats have come, rats were infested. Along with the cargo, rats also have come, and people were infected. And it did a lot of havoc. The town Marseille in those days, the city Marseille, had about 90,000 population. It was not so big as that of London. And in that, 50,000 people perished, it seems. Daily, 5 to 10,000 people, they were dying. Such a huge, big toll was there on account of this plague. Many people, 10,000 people have fled. So 50 died, 10,000 fled. And seeing this, the then ruler of France, Louis XV, he hit upon a plan. He ordered to construct a huge wall around the city so that people will not fly away, they will not run away. But anyway, it must have taken a long time. We can just imagine by the time the wall was over, many people must have taken away the disease to other parts of the country, France. So there are a number of lessons that people can learn from this particular Marseille plague. Number one is what the then administration has done. They have prioritized. It was a wrong priority. Economics was the priority for them, not the human lives. If the economy can be revived even later, even a year or years later. But then what they did was they sacrificed the human lives for the sake of economic revival, for the sake of silk and cotton to be sold in the local market during the period of the annual festival. They have brought the disease out of the ship. And this was a major lesson which was learned later on. There was also another age-old adage given. They used to remember in French, "Cito, longe, trade." This, which means, "Cito," you just fly away, you run away when the disease occurs. "Longe," it is you stay away for a longer period of time. At a far-off place, you stay for a longer time. And then the third mantra is "Tarde." See, come back slowly. You need not be in great hurry to come back to your place. So this was the three-pronged mantra that people were also taught in those days, and this was followed for a long time with the hindsight. This was taught by Marcel Plague. So with Marseille, we'll leave Marseille there, we'll move on to the other part of the globe. During the 17th and 18th centuries, you find America was also hit by such plagues, such pandemics to a large extent, mostly yellow fever. And cities like Philadelphia, etc., were to bear the brunt of the yellow fever that was brought by the Europeans. As I was telling at the opening part of our talk, that the Spaniards were the first to go there to visit America. But later on, the Spaniards have gone to colonize, to conquer, to settle down, to occupy the lands. As you know what they all did, we need not go into the details. But Spaniards were not the only Europeans to do all this. There were other people, neighboring European countries, Portugal, for example. Will it keep quiet? If Spain has gone, Portugal will not be far behind. Then similarly, English, then the French and the Dutch. What they did was, they have gone there with several diseases, and they were all imported to America. First, the native civilizations have fallen, and apart from it, with the diseases they have carried, particularly smallpox, measles, and yellow fever. These were the virulent diseases which ravaged the entire American continent, both north and south. So normally it is said that they were pushed, there was westward movement, the natives were pushed backward. They were not pushed physically, they were pushed this way. The death and destruction was there, and the natives were thus exterminated by not only arms to some extent, but by diseases. And Philadelphia was hit so much with yellow fever in the year 1793. At that time, it was not Washington. Washington was to come up as the capital later, but Philadelphia was the then capital city. The capital was infested with yellow fever so much that there were several rumors that Africans are immune to the yellow fever. This was a misconception which was doing rounds at that time. So what they did, they imported Africans, black Africans, in large numbers as slaves, with the intention that they can serve the sick and the diseased, serving the suffering without any bother with that, because they are supposed to have immunity. That was the reason why in large numbers you find ship full of Africans were imported during that particular period. Anyway, Philadelphia was very much devastated on account of this yellow fever. Now coming back to Europe, after the London plague and Marseilles, you also have nearer home. Let us not miss discussing what plague has done to our Indian national movement. It is an irony that anti-colonial movement, which was picking up by the end of 19th century, to a large extent was propelled by the disease, namely bubonic plague. We call it as Bombay plague, bubonic plague in Bombay. This plague, which occurred in the year 1897, is directly related to the growth of Indian nationalism. How come? If when you think in terms of the causes for the rise of anti-British sentiments, you have a number of reasons. Dalhousie becomes the first target, rather, his doctrine of lapse. We find how the Sepoy Mutiny, these things are all very discussed. But one reason I want to remind you that this bubonic plague also has contributed to the rise of Indian nationalism. That is, there was a time when this epidemic broke in 1897. It was very virulent in Bombay and Pune, throughout Maharashtra, as in the case of the present pandemic. People were suffering a great lot on account of the spread of bubonic plague. And when it became uncontrollable, there was one Rand, Colonel Rand, and he was an ICS officer, as a military person also, Indian Civil Service officer. He was appointed as plague officer for Pune. And this is an example as to how the governments should have some empathy towards the people when epidemics occur, when pandemics occur. Here was a government. This government was not by the people of India. It was a colonial government, and they are not supposed to have any sympathy towards the ruled, and they acted in a very tyrannical way. The best example is that this Colonel Rand, he acted in a very brutal way in the name of disinfection. See, he went, there was nothing to stop him. He, along with his army of officers, they went to each and every house in Pune, and they entered. See, in Hindu homes, there are some places which they consider as sacred, secret, etc., where they do puja and all. So he never had any regard for such places of worship, etc. Everything was equal for him. So they dismantled many of the things. They pulled down the furniture and the pictures of, and the Hindus, as you know, you have a plethora of gods and goddesses adorning every room and every place in a average Hindu home. All this was disregarded by Colonel Rand and his army of officers. So this was very revolting for some of the conservative people in the city. So you know how Chepakar brothers, two young people, young brothers, they felt so bad on the activities of Colonel Rand that on 22nd June that year, 1897, they shot him dead. The plague officer in Pune, Colonel Rand, was shot down by two young nationalists, and they were full of nationalistic spirit, Chapekar brothers. Recently, a Marathi film has been made in very recent years. Shankar Nag of Malgudi film, he was the person who wrote the script for it. And two people, a couple, Patwardhan couple, they were the producers. They also acted in it. The name of the film was 22 June, because the 22 June was the day when Colonel Rand was shot dead. You can just imagine how in the back of the present day generation also, the plague is in fresh memory. The person, Colonel Rand, is still afresh in their memories, and the film has been taken much to the delight of the Maharashtrian people. It is a Marathi film. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he criticized vehemently not only Rand, but the system, how the colonial administration was bringing such a catastrophe during the period of plague. This is an example as to how colonialism had no great sympathy for the people they were expected to administer. Now,
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? There are a lot of questions that people want you to answer. So maybe your talk we will wind up in another 5 minutes so that you can answer, because they're all waiting for you to answer their questions. Thank you.
True. Right. Uma, can you see me? Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, sir. And it's very interesting. Maybe
right.
another 5 to 7 minutes. Yes.
No, I can, anytime I can stop. I'll take 2 minutes to wind up.
No, sir, you can take 5 minutes because you still have one more and then you can conclude. Thank you, sir.
So, particularly students of history, if you are listening, you will be delighted to know how Gangadhar Tilak also, he spoke vehemently on the system that was given to us at that period of time by the Britishers. The insensitive colonial administration was very much criticized. And this, as I was telling, gave a great fillip to the rise of Indian national movement. Then we will, before we wind up, I would like to just bring to your mind the role that was played by the Spanish flu. It is an irony that the influenza, it was a flu, it was not plague or cholera. This influenza is named as Spanish flu. The irony is the influenza was not born in Spain, nor it died in Spain, yet the name stuck to it. The reason was, as all of you know, it was during the period of World War I, First World War. The Allies, as well as the Axis powers, all of them were mum on by imposing press censor. Nothing was coming out to the newspapers. There was a strict censor, and when the influenza broke out and the flu broke out, even about the news of the flu was not revealed, was not discussed, was not published in those respective newspapers. It was only a neutral country like Spain which published extensively not only on the wars First World War, but even on the casualties which the flu was claiming. And in Spanish newspapers, it seems funnily, there used to be two columns of obituaries. One, the who is who of the military leaders of both the sides, Axis as well as Allies, who died during the war. And another section was that the who is who of the people who perished during the influenza. And you know, even India was not left out. Gandhi was not left out. Gandhi family was not left out. Gandhiji's very grandson, he was a victim of it. Harilal's eldest son. Gandhiji's eldest daughter-in-law passed away during this particular flu. Gandhi himself was inflicted, but he survived. Thank God, he survived so that he could fight for independence. And you know, all that is history later. But his work, be notary, Churchill, of course, he was a minister during that time. He was an young, energetic junior minister when the First World War was going on. He was connected with the war as a minister, but he was to conduct the Second World War much later, decades later. He became the prime minister in order to conduct, not only conducting, he won the war. He was to lead not only the British, but the Allies. So that way, Spanish flu was the last great epidemic before the present coronavirus that we are now passing through. So many of the present day practices, I need not remind you as to how masking, quarantine, and physical distance, social distance, many of these practices that we are now adopting, they are directly from Spanish flu. If you see the vintage photographs of Spanish flu, you will clearly see as to how all these practices now. But unfortunately, these vintage photographs, this news about Spanish flu, etc., are coming only now. When another pandemic is knocking at the doors, these things have come out. Unfortunately, they were not publicized. People are not educated as to how to combat if any pandemic or epidemic or endemic comes. And their history lessons, we are there to teach history, and all the social sciences also, they do about it in their own way. But there is no way for us to think over, to ponder over these epidemics and pandemics which occurred earlier. That would have been a great lesson for the collective mind. I don't say that this should be, history should be taught to each and everyone. No, I'm not an authority for history being taught to each and everyone, but the collective mind of the society should have some historical sense, because what memory is to the human being, what memory is to the mind, history is to the society. But this has been forgotten, this particular aspect, the pandemic, how people reacted earlier, that will give us a lot of lessons. As I was telling, Marcel has got many lessons to be learned even at this distance of time. Spanish flu, yes, because it was not so distant. Somehow we are thankful for the media in providing us some of the graphic pictures of the things what happened in Spanish flu. Now, coming to the how it will end. Is there any lesson already? Already, people have been speculating. Speculations are rife with after the coronavirus, things will not be the same as it was earlier. Like any other pandemic, this also will bring in changes. What kind of changes people are expecting? Already, people are telling that the present new liberal order will go. It will give way for a new order. People are expecting that some sections, they strongly believe that capitalism will have its doom. And many others, they say that nationalism will come up with a rejuvenated spirit, with well-defined borders, etc. And people will become more inwardly, as people have become earlier after the Black Death, etc. With well-defined borders, nationalism or overdose of nationalism will come into being. Some others have gone to the extent of telling already coronavirus has written the obituary of globalization, because the present one, the present form, which we are now familiar, it was the result of, it is a globalized disease. So globalization will be the first thing to go. But I myself, I have no clue. But what I can firmly believe and say is the entire set of dynamics in the present structure as we have today, it will undergo changes. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the informative and enriching session. We are very grateful to you for sharing your immense knowledge with us. I now request Ms. T. Rupali, Head Department of Public Administration, to take over for the question answer session.
Thank you, Alice. Good morning to one and all. Now we will be reading out the questions which have been posted by the participants. The first question is from Mr. Pranay Rupani, PhD scholar from Hyderabad Central University. Sir's question is, as the plague made the Roman Empire fall, do you think we will see a change of guard in the next set of elections around the world? Shall I repeat, sir?
Yes, yes. Please.
Okay, sir. The question is, as the plague made the Roman Empire fall, do you think we will see a change of guard in the next set of elections around the world?
Yes. See, like you say, pandemic is said to have arrived from the Greek word pan and demic. Demic is people. The word democracy itself is a derivation from demic. So wherever democracies are there, wherever people were fed with the news of the present day travails of the people, and if they remember and if they come to know what has happened during the period of Roman Empire, justice and rule, naturally the power, with the power of voting, if it is a democracy, not a guided democracy, if it is a real democracy, I cannot give a guarantee with regard to the guided democracy, because most of the countries today, they do call themselves as democratic countries, but they are mostly guided democracies. But if it is a real real democracy, if people are the real power to change, to bring that particular change, this experience, this kind of this opportunity that is given for us to assess our past will definitely stand in good stead, and voting pattern, the kind of role that the normal people, the usual people will play, will be thoroughly different. It will not be the same as it has occurred earlier. So to your question, the coming elections, the next immediate coming elections, there will be a sea of change with regard to the pattern. They will try to assess things not outside but inside, what they have felt. And I am sure that individuality, the role that individuals play, will be better and more effective when compared to the existing elections. They will not, in other words, they will not be led by the people from outside. They will be led by themselves, their own thinking, their own judgments. They'll become better judges of themselves. That's what I feel.
Thank you, sir. Moving further, the next question is from Dr. B. Lavanya, Department of History, Osmania University. Ma'am's question is, what were the precautions taken by rulers when pandemics occurred during medieval times?
Yes, during the medieval period, the most important one was the Black Death, and the rulers of the time, particularly in Europe, they were also a part of the system where you don't see much of the ameliorative measures taken by the rulers. Like, for example, when the French ruler, Bourbon ruler, Louis XV, ordered for the construction of a wall around the city so that people will not fly away. Because they themselves in French, it was the clue given by them whenever pandemic occurs, you try to run away. That is how people were encouraged to go away. And containing them, in order to put them at one place, the governments have taken some measures, particularly in the medieval period. And it was mostly addressing the farming communities. See, in Black Death, you find the when the disease was raging over, you come across, it was the ruler was not that powerful at that time. the most powerful were the feudal lords, and the feudal lords were the victims during the period of Black Death. So there was so much of confusion. Already the rulers were depending upon the rich landlords, the feudal lords, and the feudal lords are under pressure now. So politically speaking, there was less role of the government, the successive governments, to deal with the situation. To a large extent, people were left to fend themselves in order to combat the virus, and the role of the king, because it was not centralized. Till you come across the modern period, the the states were not having national governments. The governments were many in each and every country. Each feudal lord played a role of the ruler. That's why till the nation states have come into being, Ferdinand Isabella in Spain and Henry VII in England, Louis XIII in France, these were the people who brought that nationalistic spirit and made each and every of these regions as a full-fledged nation states with one government, with one army, with the kind of spirit of nationalism. So a better role was played by these national states after that, not during the period of the medieval period. So medieval period, to a very large, that is why people used to think that these were pandemics, epidemics were the visitations of gods and goddesses coming from heavens in order to punish the people whenever they were on the wrong side. They used to resign themselves to the fate of the people will come for some time. So the role of the governments, Ms. Lavanya, I feel it was very minimal. It was there, but it was not like the present where they could call the shots.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ms. Margaret Francis, Head Department of Social Management, St. Francis College for Women. Ma'am's question is, does a pandemic bring changes in political dimensions of country's administration?
Yes, definitely. Because at that period of time, they learned lessons out of this, and there were many changes, particularly in the medieval period. After the Black Death, you find political changes did happen. You see, the trend was towards the commoners. The feudal armies were disbanded. National armies have come into being. They were distributed, and immediately later there were also several inventions, several discoveries, inventions, printing press, paper, gunpowder, and apart from it, discoveries also were there, geographical discoveries, starting with Bartholomew Dias. You find Vasco da Gama, Columbus, Magellan. So what happened is the horizons of human knowledge, it started to expand very widely. It was hitherto confined only to the European countries. Now the world before them was larger. There was something happening across the Atlantic. So there was trade, transit became more quicker. The shipbuilding was able to gain momentum. With all this, though epidemics and pandemics also increased, they became more frequent, they became more severe, they became more widespread. In spite of it, those who survived, they learned lessons out of it. And politically, you find there was, that is why I said the course correction was
I think we lost connection with sir.
Okay.
We'll just give a moment to see if sir can get back. He's gone. He lost total connection. Sessions of enter. So we thank the audience for your patient listening. We just request you to have a little more patience. We are just waiting for sir to get back. Probably it's a technical problem. He's in a distant place and he's connected from there. So we want to give you this time. Probably you can take this time to fill up your feedback forms and send it to us, because unless we receive your feedback forms, we cannot send the certificate to you. So we will take a moment and wait for him to get back. If he cannot get back, then probably we will wind up this webinar. We'll just give him a moment because we have some very interesting questions which we really wanted sir to answer. I think he's getting connected. Yes. Thank you, sir. Can you hear us, sir? Yes, he's still connecting. So I think we'll give him a moment.
Hello.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome back, sir. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you
sorry,
clearly.
Sorry, there was some interruption.
Yes, sir. No problem, sir. We can hear you clearly now.
Yes, thank God it has come back.
So Rupali, probably you could ask the next question.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So the next question is from Dr. Sham, Department of Economics. He's from SFC College. Sir, he wants to know that generally we learn from past and act accordingly. What should be our role? I repeat the question, sir. Sir asked a question that's stating, generally we learn from past and act accordingly. What should be our role in the present context?
If I have heard the question properly,
sir,
we learn from whatever.
You generally learn from the past. Yeah.
Yes. We generally learn from the past.
Yes.
And then what should be our attitude to the
in the present?
The present.
The present, sir.
So history is the record of past, and history never teaches lessons. History generally, as against people's notion, history never teaches. It has got lessons. It is up to the people to learn or not to learn. So it is not a moralist. History is not a moralist. History is something neutral. So if you have an eye to learn, you can learn. If you want to forget, yes, as once Dr. Uma was reminding us, that if you tend to forget, you will be condemned to it. So history is only a finger post. As you find on the highway, finger post will never tell us that you have to take this path. It is only, it shows the right path. It shows which side you have to go. But we are to decide. It depends upon our own wisdom to know, to follow it or not. That's why history also never repeats, as generally people believe history repeats itself. It is a notion. History never repeats, but because history is a quintessence of human experiences. What two human beings think, does, they will not be similar. And history is nothing but the quintessence of human experiences. That's why we learn from history, and we have to follow. You have to take the decision by yourself, and what you do, what you learn, what you have learned, it is up to you to follow it or not. That's why now the collective mind of the nation should remember history. So to follow it or not, it is purely depending upon your whims, fancies. History never commands, history never dictates, history never compels us to follow it. History is something, it is not a moralist, right? I do not know whether I got the question and answered to it.
Yes, sir, that's fine. Rupali, do you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. So moving further, the next question is from Ms. Alina Jyoti, Head Department of Chemistry from St. Francis College for Women. Ma'am's question is, what is the impact of the present pandemic on the socio-political scenario from perspective of a historian?
That is what I said. In concluding my speech, I said, I am no prophet of doom. I am no prophet of doom. I don't expect that very many revolutionary changes will occur, though there is still scope. But people have been already that the present setup to a large extent will change. So for example, I was telling globalization will be a thing of the past. And I asked this question, will you accept if I say globalization will come to an end because of the globalized pandemic? I am sure you will not accept it. We have to wait and see as to how this transforms. I repeat once again what I said here, that the dynamics, the entire dynamics of the present setup that we have at present, it will undergo tremendous changes. And we will also have the occasion to look within ourselves, societies to look within. And definitely there will be major repercussions on account of the present scenario, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Rupali, the next question.
Yes, ma'am. The next question is from Ms. Padma Shri, Head Department of Computer Science. Ma'am's question is, youth who pursue engineering IT courses dream of jobs abroad. Will this situation hinder their chances in future? I repeat, sir, IT courses dream of jobs abroad. Will this situation hinder their chances in future?
Towards when our young boys and girls, when they have steamed out, when they came out in search of their hopes. Earlier, there were the people who steamed out of their houses in order to pursue the dreams, in order to chase their dreams, going into the lands of opportunities, lands of places where they could do. They have been doing very well. They were able to excel when compared to the other kind of people coming from other countries. And we have, as Indians, our young workforce has earned so both name, fame, etc. But what will be their aspirations now? We have to wait and see. I will record it as a historian. I will record it when it happens. But as an individual, I wish to know from her, from the very questioner, as to what will be the scenario regarding our young boys and girls who are still trying to find ways to come back their homes. Will the same kind of anxiety will be there to go back again to the place of work, however green fields they are. See, they went in search of greenery, pastures, etc. True in those days, but then life is more important than career. It is what they have decided in the wisdom of their thinking. They have come back, they are coming back. And it may take some time to overcome, because these pandemics also have two types of ending. The one which we are passing through will also end. How? There are two ways. One is by medicine. If the death rate plummets, if cases being recorded plummet, when a vaccine is invented, vaccine is introduced, it may come down. That's one. But another way, another type of ending, pandemic ending, is by this social one. That is, when the fear of pandemic ends, when people get over this fear, there also is the end of pandemic. When this young workforce, which is the pride of our country, when they win this, when they get over this fear psychosis, and when they notwithstanding all the threats of the pandemic, when they go back to work, when they are well received there in the places where they were earlier working, now I think nothing would stop.
because in this present day scenario, to find distances have come down. Already, we have been telling that it is a global village. Planet has become a global village. So there will be some lessons learned out of it. Things will not be the same as it was, but with a slight course correction, they will resume. They will resume. I am not pessimistic to see that there is every doom everywhere. I am not a prophet of doom.
Sir, you very rightly said that, sir. And I really want to assure my friend Padmashri that, you know, the young people, their dreams will never be shattered, because I think more than ever before we are going online. So we are going to get in touch with all the foreign universities, the workplaces there. And already many of them are working from home. And I'm sure that this situation will change, and we will soon get connected again to the rest of the world. Once the lockdown is lifted, like sir very much said, that I think once the fear of this pandemic would go, definitely I think it would you help us to overcome this real crisis that all of us feel is looming so large over us. And I think even the connections are getting a little weak. So though we have a lot of questions, maybe we will pass it on to sir and ask him to answer us. I want to also tell you that the recording of this is available, the video. So for those of you who would like to see the recording of this, you can write to us and to the email from where you got the link, and we will send the video to you, the recorded video to you, so that you can hear it. But as of now, I think I hand over to Alice.
Half of the Faculty of Social Sciences, St. Francis College for Women, I extend my deepest gratitude to Professor KSS Session for his highly insightful talk on the prevailing global pandemic, giving us a historical account of many other pandemics that occurred in the past. Your insights were indeed much needed for all of us to understand the current state of uncertainty better. Thank you, sir, for throwing light with your historical perspective on the possibilities that the current situation can throw up for the near future. I also thank our coordinator, Dr. Uma Joseph, for her great and diligent efforts in organizing this webinar. Thanks to my colleagues from the social science faculty for doing their valuable bit in making this the webinar happen. Lastly, I would thank all the participants for taking their time off to be part of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you for participation. And a gentle reminder to all the participants, those who have not filled the feedback form, kindly, the link is posted in the chat box. We request you to fill the feedback form and with the correct email ID to which you will be receiving your e-certificates. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you once again, and we are going to shortly stop the live streaming of this. Thanks once again to all my colleagues and also to the audience for your very, very patient listening and for the wonderful questions that you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine, Uma. I thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we would like you to remain for some more time. We will stop the streaming. Just hold on, sir.